You are about to enter the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast on shockwaveskullsessions.com. And now your host, Bob Nalbandian.
Shockwave Skull Sessions number 57, or at least I think it's number 57. I am Bob Nalbandian, your host, and we've got a great episode for you. This was a conversation with some old friends, or actually some old pen pals from back in the early 80s. My good friend John Strednansky, who has contributed on a few Skull Sessions in the past, and he is also a producer in the forthcoming Inside Metal film Bay Area Godfathers, which incidentally is all complete. And as you guys know, we unfortunately had to cancel all the screenings, all the public screenings. We are trying to work on some kind of a private screening before the release. The release will be late summer now. It'll be available on DVD and streaming. And it came out fantastic. Really, really happy with the film. But anyway, going back to John Strednansky, he joins me along with an other old friend from Germany, Mr. Alex G. He had a fanzine called Shock Power back in the early 80s when I did my Headbanger fanzine and John Strednansky did his Metal Rendezvous fanzine. So much like the podcast we did a couple episodes back with Ron Quintana, John Cornarins, and Patrick Scott, this is another very old school metal podcast where we get into a lot of the old new wave of British heavy metal bands and, of course, the German and European bands. And for those of you that don't know Alex G, as I mentioned, he was the original editor for the great German metal fanzine of the early 80s called Shock Power. In fact, he's got a Facebook page, Shock Power Rising, you guys should definitely check out. Definitely an old school metal guy who has gone on to being literally one of the biggest journalists in entertainment throughout all of Europe. He writes for a couple of the biggest entertainment magazines, so he's interviewed not just all your greatest metal bands, but all the big pop stars and everything else in between. So we're going to get right to this conversation now. A great conversation, about an hour long, with Mr. John Strednansky and Alex G. Enjoy.
Hey, it's good to talk to you for a first time, man.
Absolutely, man. It's been too many years, Alex. John, I talk to him all the time.
I'm sorry, we're going to do this in German.
Yeah,
Alex, machen wir's auf Deutsch.
I was afraid of that.
Prost.
Well, this is going to be fun. So, we'll just, no agenda. I've got nothing written down. We're just going to bullshit like three old school metal guys from the old tape trading days.
Yeah, I mean, we go way back to about 1984, early 1984.
Yeah, I would say that. Is that when Shock Power first started?
Shock Power, are you rolling already?
Yeah, we're rolling.
Okay, cool. No, Shock Power came out July 1983, and this was prior to Kill 'Em All. Kill 'Em All came out end of July, but we came out in the beginning. So in the first issue, you have no Metallica because we didn't have material on Metallica. We just had the No Life to Leather demo tape. And a couple of days before, in June of '83, there was an Art Shock festival from Metal Mike.
Right, I remember that.
And they had Merciful Fate, and Raven was playing, and Trance, the German band that got us our name because they had a song called Shock Power.
Yeah, that's right. Power Infusion was their album.
That's where I took the name for the magazine, and then we put the advertisements in Germany, in other magazines, that Shock Power was a new fanzine for sale, and we also put one in Kerrang. And Kerrang was read by all you guys.
Right.
That's how we got in touch.
Wow. Yeah. Your memory's much better than mine.
Alex, you and I got in touch, but I know you started writing for Metal Rendezvous pretty quickly. We started it a little earlier. We started 1982 was our first issue, and it was just local bands. And the name came also from another band, of course, from the Crocus, who had the Metal Rendezvous album in 1980. That's where we stole our name from. So we kind of have some similarities there. But,
wow.
And then you got the Headbanger box.
That's right. I believe the first issue was April of 1982. And you came out just before me, right, Stred? Or was it around the same time?
It was right around there.
Yeah, because I
don't remember which month it was, but I wasn't even that closely involved yet with issue number 1. It was really Tim Korochikov who did that first issue. And Bill Hale and I were thinking, man, this is so cool. We're going to get involved. And that's when we really started working on issue number 2.
That's right.
And that's when we got involved.
Originally a pen pal with Tim. And Tim, I remember he was a big Silver Mountain fan. And
yes.
I don't know if I got him through Kerrang as well, but that, of course, is where we got most of our pen pals, even the U.S. pen pals, Ron Quintana, through his little classified ad in Kerrang magazine. So that was
for me, it was also Brian Liu, who did the one issue of Whiplash,
right?
And he was the one who sent me the No Life Till Leather demo tape, and also a Metallica Metal Up Your Ass shirt that I still got.
Well, that's a rarity.
I don't have that. I got the No Life Till the Leather demo and the shirt from Lars directly.
Yeah, well, that's even better.
So I had that original handwritten cassette cover from Lars. But
I met Lars the last time 2 years ago when Metallica was playing in Germany. And I made an interview. I'm now working for Der Spiegel, which is like a Newsweek or Time magazine in America. So it's the biggest news magazine in Europe, right? And so I did an interview with Lars, and I brought my old Shock Power, a couple of Shock Power issues to show him. And he was almost in tears. And, we talked about Stred, we talked about Bob, we talked about Brian and Ron. I came up with all these names. And I mean, I met Metallica over the years about 50 times when I worked for Bravo. Bravo was a weekly magazine, also a huge magazine that even Stred read it when he was young, which is a long time ago.
Well, you got to explain. You got to explain that Bravo is really aimed at prepubescent teenagers. That's why, really, Alex's favorite band is the Osmond Brothers. Really, that's where he started out.
Crazy horses. Well, listen. You know what? I suppose I should probably do a proper intro because people are wondering who the hell are these German guys. I know people know John. John's been a regular on the Skull Sessions, and he's did a lot of interviews for the Shockwaves Hard Radio podcast as well. But people may not be familiar with the infamous Alex G from Germany, the original editor for Shock Power magazine. And, you're talking about Bravo and all these other major publications in Germany. Kind of give people a little background. I know you've interviewed everyone in the world, every major rock star, from Paul McCartney to Richie Blackmore, dude. I mean, you interviewed Blackmore. How cool is that?
And Jimmy Page and Pete Townsend.
Dude, you're my idol.
And all the metal guys. My dream... Okay, let me explain that to you. I am from Germany. I grew up in Mannheim, so there was a lot of American barracks there, a lot of GIs, So I hung out with the army brats, which I guess I got more of an American than a British accent. And I'm very, very thankful for that. When I was a kid, the only magazine around, we're talking about 1978, 79, there was no heavy metal press at all. In Germany, there was a teen magazine. It was called Bravo. And Bravo started out, lo and behold, in 1956.
Wow.
And they had Elvis Presley on the cover, So my mother, she was an avid Elvis fan, and she always read Bravo, and later she bought it for me. So that's where I had Rainbow and Thin Lizzy and Black Sabbath and AC/DC and Kiss. They were all featured in that teen magazine. Because there was nothing else, and Stred knows it. I mean, they had Slade, they had Sweet, they had Susie Quattro, they had all these rock stars, but also teeny poppers, of course, But I was always looking for the heavy metal and hard rock guys. So in 1980, I got the new issue. Again, there was no heavy metal press around, and I open up the magazine and I see 5 guys and a monster, and they say it's a new band from England, Iron Maiden. And that's when I bought the album, I heard Prowler, and I was gone, It was like a new world had opened up, And so the funny thing is, in Bravo, there was always a photo of the reporter with the artist, So I see a picture of the reporter with, say, Tina Turner, with Kiss, with Angus Young. You know, I saw these guys with the rock stars. You know,
are you sure that wasn't Metal Edge magazine and Jerry Miller? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alex. Inside joke.
You know, so I was totally you know, starstruck. You know, and I saw all these pictures, and wow, these guys are hanging out with the rock stars. You know, so pretty soon it became obvious that that's what I wanted to do. And to cut a long story short, I was living in a relatively small town. It was boring. I was a heavy metal fan. I had another friend, Frank, who had the same record collection, you know. He had Tigers of Pantang. He had Angel Witch, you know. He had Samson, Raven, you know, all these new bands, new wave of British heavy metal that we all love so much, you know. So we started Shock Power because my dream was never to be a rock star with a guitar. My dream was to have my name under a heavy metal article. And that came true.
Awesome.
And that's very similar to my story. Yeah.
Yeah.
I started a little earlier than that. My sister introduced me to Bravo because she was in love with Bernd Kluwer. Yeah, Alex knows who that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's German, kind of a teeny bopper pop star in the early 70s. But then I got an issue of Bravo, and there was Suzi Quatro in her black leather outfit sitting on a motorcycle. Yeah, and I think that's a famous poster, Alex. You probably have that one too.
And you wanted to be the motorcycle.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah. And of course that was a time when I discovered the bands, not necessarily German bands, but the British glam bands, Slade, Sweet, Status Quo, Suzi Quatro, T-Rex. Watching the German TV show Disco with Ilya Richter on ZDF, which was a second program station in German TV. Saturday nights, I think it was once a month, they showed all the hits, and that's when I discovered those bands. I didn't really discover and I know we're going to talk a lot about the German scene and the German bands, but until later on, once I moved to America, I started discovering all these old German bands that really impressed me as well. And I know we'll get into that. But I'm like Alex. I didn't really want to be a guitar player or lead singer. I just wanted to meet the bands, get to know them, and write about them. And that came true for me as well. It was really cool.
Then we became pen pals, you know,
Yep.
and that's now where we have now a full circle, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, we, you know, there was Bob Nalbandian in New York with Kick-Ass Monthly.
Yeah.
We all know our dear friend Wayne Archibald up in Canada,
Sure.
you know, who gave us Voivod and Exciter stuff, you know, and Anvil, you know, and Witch Killer and all these cooler bands. And there was Ron Quintana and us, you know. And today we're back together, you know, through Facebook.
It's
amazing. And I love it. You know, it's so amazing that we all still in touch and we are all still connected to the heavy metal scene.
Yeah. I mean, think about back then, there were no cell phones or any internet or anything. And phone calls, as you remember, were super expensive to call anyone. So
Absolutely.
It was all through writing letters. And we knew everyone. We all knew the same people worldwide, like a group of 20 people.
Yeah,
you know,
maybe a little more. Yeah, maybe a little more.
Sure.
But yeah. Then when I came home from school, I mean, I was still a student back then, you know, and I came back from school and my mother said to me, Alex, the postman is freaking out, you know. He's got to buy an extra box just for you. And I came home and on my table, it was almost breaking down with demo tapes, you know, and magazines, you know. So every day was Christmas, you know.
Oh, I remember those days.
Good days, man. Every day, wait by that mailbox.
But that was the magic. The magic was, you know, you had nothing available on the internet. You couldn't watch all the concerts at YouTube and stuff, you know.
Sure.
There was a lot of magic still going on in your mind. And, you know, I was thinking, you know, what does Stred look like? What does Brian Lou look like? What does Bob Nalbandian look like and stuff, you know? And the funniest thing ever is when Stred hit me up on Facebook and said, Alex, I'm going to be in Munich, where I live now since many years, you know. We should meet, you know. This is about like 8 or 10 years ago. And I said, yes, Stretch, sure, it's great. You're coming to Munich? Yeah, for the Oktoberfest. Fantastic, let's meet. So we meet, and we hadn't met before. We hadn't seen each other before, you know, and we met in a cafe and had a coffee, and all of a sudden Stretch is talking German. I'm like, what? You're talking German? I thought he was American. And he said, no, I'm from Slovakia, you know, and my parents, I used to live in Munich, he said. And now it's the craziest thing. I said, where did you live? And he said, on Leopoldstrasse. Okay, that's a big street. That was exactly the street that we met on, really. And what number? He said, what was the number?
32.
32. I said, what 32? My office was in exactly that address. So my address was in the house that Stred lived in 40 years earlier.
He's haunting
you.
Stred is a ghost.
Yeah.
He's still there.
That's crazy, man. That's crazy.
So I hope that one day, there would be a huge family gathering, where, I never met Wayne Archibald, Bob Nalbandian is gone, unfortunately,
Yeah.
I never been to San Francisco, but at least I'll promise, if I'm back in L.A., because sometimes I come to L.A., I'm definitely going to see you, Bob.
Let me know. I'm actually up in the Bay Area now, too, but I come to LA.
Really?
I'm in LA all the time, so.
Oh, where do you live now?
I'm in San Jose. I've been up here for a couple of years now. I was working on the new documentary with John Strednansky, the Bay Area Godfathers, which is completed and looks fantastic. And unfortunately, we had to cancel all the screenings. We had, 4 or 5 different screenings that we had set up for San Francisco, LA, and Portland.
I follow it.
Yeah,
we will revisit those screenings, and that's when we'll get Alex out.
Absolutely.
He's going to write this big expose on our documentary for Spiegel magazine.
Yeah.
Now, you do all the big pop stars, too. I always see you on Facebook with Lady Gaga or Beyonce.
That was the thing. When you worked at Bravo, like I said earlier, I was fascinated with the reporters always having their picture taken, because Bravo, a huge magazine, there was 6 million readers a week. And going for 16 plus years, okay? So it's now today, obviously, the circulation is much smaller, we lost a lot, and I stopped 6 years ago. I was, in the end, I was the editor, the boss of the magazine, but then I got fired because, the circulation was going too low because of social media. But back in the day, I worked with Metallica. I went to Brazil to see Sepultura. I had Exodus in the magazine, I had all the Slayer, all these bands was featured in the magazine. But I was not also only working with heavy metal bands. I was working with Michael Jackson even, I was working with, later on with like Beyonce or Jennifer Lopez, but also always Guns N' Roses, Aerosmith, all the Maidens, of this world, and AC/DC, so I met every Angus Young and Deep Purple and every rock star that I like, except for Mick Jagger, I have met them all, and so my dream came true, and these pictures were always taken, not to show off, but as a proof, like our reporters are meeting the stars.
Wow.
So, and I kept doing the collection. I kept going on doing the collection, So every time I do an interview, like I did Pete Townsend and Ronnie Wood last December, I'm having my picture taken with them because I'm a fan.
Yeah. And the thing about Bravo was that it wasn't, keep in mind, it wasn't a music magazine as such.
Right.
It was a magazine, just a cultural magazine aimed at teenagers that had everything from our favorite when we were very young, sex education pages, all the way to, about furniture and movies and music. I mean, the whole cultural spectrum was represented in Bravo. So it was actually a fun magazine.
It's a legend. It's really a media legend in Germany. I mean, there are not too many magazines around that are now. Bravo is in its 64th year. So it's still going. It's still there. It's still a print magazine. But now selling not having 6 million readers a week anymore, And the good thing is, I was there like in the late 80s and the 90s, and this was when heavy metal was there, and there was huge stories, and because of the big circulation, I could always meet Def Leppard, and we had a photo studio, so we always got the whole band. That sometimes when you do an interview, with no disrespect to musicians, but you get the bassist, This can be interesting, but when I have an interview with Aerosmith, I want Steven Tyler and Joe Perry.
Right.
That's who I got, That was a big luxury, that we always got the lead vocal, and for the photos, the whole band would show up. You know, Metallica, many times Metallica. You know, so all four of them. You know, starting with Cliff Burton, going through Jason Newsted. You know. Always the four of them taking pictures, you know, making fun a little bit, you know, because it was not a heavy metal magazine. But they all knew it had a huge circulation, and they would sell a lot of records back in the day being featured in the magazine.
You know, just going back to, you know, I obviously grew up in America, and we had Circus and Cream and Hit Parader, and then we had the Tiger Beats and, you know, what they call the teeny bopper magazines. And I know in Europe, there's a magazine out of Sweden, as you might know, Poster, which, and I've seen some issues on. I've actually got the Poster book from my buddy Jonas, and I see, you know, it's got like Mick Tucker naked, like sprawled naked with his cock hanging out on the couch. And I'm thinking, this would never pass in America, but it would have all these pop stars and movie stars, and then, you know, I guess Sweet were kind of a teeny bopper. They kind of rode the line between a teeny bopper band and a heavy metal band, you know, the way the label tried pushing them. But it was a little bit similar here in the States, but it was very separate. Like Circus would have the TV stars. You would have like Tony Danza or, you know, the cast of Happy Days, and then you would have Aerosmith and that. And Circus was the one that kind of crossed that. But, you know, other than that, you had to go to the Tiger Beats and the teeny bopper. It was a bit separate.
Yeah. But basically, you know, the thing that, and we have to give the credit, obviously, to Kerrang, you know, they started in 1981, and Kerrang was at the epicenter of heavy metal press.
Absolutely.
And then it was Brian Slagle, you know, who did New Heavy Metal Review. He was also my pen pal back in the day. I still have handwritten letters from him, you know. He wouldn't remember though, but he sent me all the Trouble records, you know, the Savage Grace and what have you, Metal Massacre, you know. And you have your Headbanger, John Metal Rendezvous, and then there was Metal Mania, all the famous magazines. In Germany, I started Shock Power. And this was the very first regular heavy metal fanzine. There was no Metal Hammer yet. Okay?
So no Rock Hard, because I know Rock Hard started as a fanzine.
No, wait, that's what let me tell you that.
Okay.
So my friends, I had two friends up in Dortmund, Uwe Lersch and Holger Stratmann. We were pen pals, just like we all, okay? We traded tapes in Germany. I had finished my Xerox black and white copy of Shock Power, okay?
Right.
And I sent it to them. I said, hey, guys, look what I've done, you know. I have a magazine. It's called Shock Power. And that gave them the idea, the inspiration to start Rock Hard. So I'm responsible, you know.
Wow.
And to this day, Uwe is my best friend, you know, and I meet Holger frequently. Rock Hard is still going strong, you know, it's still around.
Yeah.
They have now about 500 issues or so, you know. So we were there when the underground and the tape trading started, and it's also, we are all of us, we are involved in the rise of Metallica.
A small world.
We are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, to take the biggest band, you know, you got Slayer, you got Anthrax, you got Exodus and Megadeth and all, and Testament, you know, and we were all there for them when they started out, you know, but Metallica is the prime example, you know. We were the underground, the tape trading underground that got the word out, and I remember meeting them first. They came over in February of 1984. It was still Kill 'Em All. Ride the Lightning came out in the summer of '84. Right. So, and again, it was Metal Mike in Holland. You know, a very influential guy with Archok. You know, who started in '81, and he made these Archok Dark festivals. You know, for his magazine.
Yeah.
And there was Venom and Metallica. And Savage from England, you know, and that's where I met Cliff Burton, James, Lars, and Kirk, you know, and we had a little booth. Mike was so cool, and we meet every year in a festival. Mike was so cool. He had, you know, there was the H-Bomb fan club. There was another magazine from Belgium called Sucks.
Yeah.
And there was Shock Power, and we had we were allowed to have a little booth in the arena, in the back of the arena, where we could sell the magazine, you know, during the show. And we were setting it up, you know, and I had drawn a huge Shock Power logo. It took me about 5 hours, you know, to draw a Shock Power logo. And we set the magazine. And all of a sudden, after sound check, James Hetfield appears at our booth, and we almost fainted. And then Cliff Burton came, and everybody, the whole Metallica band were at our booth. We almost fainted because they were already superstars. They had one album, but to us, they were metal gods already.
That's straight, because, it's funny, I grew up, obviously, in Orange County. Lars grew up in Newport. I was in Huntington. So I got to know them through my buddy Patrick Scott, who was friends with Lars before Metallica started. So, being right in the epicenter, seeing their first show and seeing how they were so influential, because, we would send out the tapes to all our pen pals. And I didn't realize until later and just hearing you talk, how influential they were in other parts of the country. I mean, we knew, that they were big and that they had a following, but, to hear that, they were already huge rock stars and, all over Holland and Germany. And, of course you had, like you mentioned, we were all pen pals with Aardschok. I was pen pals with Stefan Roy Akers,
Me too.
My friends were, and then
Andre Methorst.
Andre. And there was, of course, Metal Forces from England, Bernard Doe and Steve Hammonds, who I was pen pals with. And there was a Dutch magazine called Headbanger, Henk van I can't pronounce his last name, and Bart Kemp. And then you had, like you said, Sucks magazine out of Belgium. You had Metal Chaos from Italy, Claudio Cubito.
I know him well,
Yeah, so there were so many. And of course, the French magazines, Enfer and Metal Attack. And we were all pen pals with each other, and everyone, was asking about Metallica. How the fuck did this band get so big in every country so quickly? And it was amazing.
The thing is though, you got to take it a step further than that. I do believe that when you compare America to Europe, and since Alex and I are both European, I think that we had a core, smaller group of really passionate fans in Europe. That passion was a lot more widespread. It was more mainstream, and that's why we saw even more acceptance of heavy metal quicker in Europe than we saw in the United States. I do believe that, and you can see today how much traditional heavy metal is still pretty big in the European scene, hardly at all here in the U.S. I think the passion runs a lot deeper with the European fans than it does over here, and that resulted in all those magazines early on. That was just kind of one reflection of that. That's always been like that in Europe.
Yeah, and all the great bands and the festivals that you mentioned, the Aardschok, the Dynamo, all the festivals in Germany and Holland that we never got till years later, but nothing like the ones in Germany or Holland.
I can say that in Germany, I speak for Germany, okay? So the fans are super loyal, okay? I remember back in '82, we had a concert, Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast. Opening act was Trust from France, right? So we couldn't wait to get into the arena, go center stage, front of stage, and hear Trust and Iron Maiden. And I heard in America, like in the '80s, you would have like Loudness or Open Up for Ozzy, for example, But when Loudness came on stage, the arena would be half empty.
Yes.
Because everybody was just waiting for Ozzy Osbourne, the big superstar, right?
Yeah.
And so it was pretty bad for the opening acts, because nobody drew attention. In Germany, it was always from start to finish. The people loved it. Exactly. So in America, you had I don't want to put it down, obviously, No,
you're right. Unless the fans were aware of the band, they would be in the parking lot drinking. They wouldn't, the opening band was just like a warm up for them,
This would be impossible for us, We'd go in and see the support act, and I remember Metallica opening for Twisted Sister, And in America, because I grew up with Americans in Mannheim whose parents were in the army, they were a lot like a flavor of the month, Now Van Halen is cool. Now Bon Jovi is cool, Then something else is cool, They called it like the flavor of the month, Now heavy metal is cool. We are into heavy metal. Now new wave is cool.
Right.
We go into new wave, And over here, it was heavy metal all the fucking way. Excuse me.
I love it. I remember in high school, there were kids, every year was different. You see the same kid, he would be, like this rocker. Then the next year, he would be a punk. He would have his head shave.
Yeah.
Then the next year he would be a new romantic or new wave guy, you know, wearing, or mod. Mod was the big thing. He would be on a little Vespa with that big jacket with the Who patch on the back. It's like, what are you now? And every year it would be a different.
Ihre Verbindung wird gehalten.
Uh-oh, did someone get disconnected?
I think we
No,
lost.
I'm okay. I'm back. I don't know what happened. I'm here.
I heard some German lady in the background. I'm going.
Yeah, something. But
Not my place, unfortunately.
Is that your masseuse there, Alex?
Oh, good one.
Dude, there's so much to talk about. I mean, after 35 years.
And I know, Bob, I know you kind of also wanted to talk about the German bands that had been around forever and ever. And I kind of used this opportunity to revisit some of the German music throughout the decades. And the one that I uncovered, by the way, and Alex, let me know what you think of this, but the earliest that I could find of a truly heavy German band was a band called Weed with a song called Sweet Morning Light. Ken Hensley is a guest stars on keyboards on that. Was released in 1971 or 2, and it's one of the heaviest songs from a German band I have ever heard, even through today.
Well, now you're going way back.
Yeah, I know. I'm a little older than you, but you think the first Lucifer's Friend album was heavy. Listen to Weed. Look it up on YouTube. Weed, Sweet Morning Light.
Of course. And, then you had the Scorpions, and the funny thing is the Scorpions in the 70s, they were worth nothing over here in Germany, and they had to go to Japan and cut Tokyo tapes, to make the German public aware, hey, look, there's this band from Hanover who's making it big in Japan,
Right.
And they were not on the radio. They were not so much on television sometimes with Uli Roth, and We'll Burn the Sky and all this stuff, And then basically when Love Drive in 79 came out with Michael Schenker, and I talked to Michael Schenker, and he would totally destroy his brother Rudolph,
Yeah, that's a weird thing.
He had nothing. He said Rudolph was standing in front of the mirror all the time, combing his hair, wanting to look like Elvis, and I was the one practicing guitar.
Yeah.
And then he got ripped off, because Rudolph got the songwriting credits for the tracks from Love Drive and stuff, but that started. And then there was obviously one of the most important bands ever to come out of Germany was Accept,
Yes.
with the Breaker album and especially Restless and Wild. I mean, I think we all remember when we put on Restless and Wild for the very first time, and you get the heyday, and the scratch and the scream from hell,
that was a game changer. That album was a true game changer.
That was the fastest song that I had ever heard up to date.
Yep.
Because when you go back into the 70s and we had our share of hard rock bands that we were all fans of, UFO, Thin Lizzy, all those, but they tended to come out of England. The German bands back then, we've all heard that expression krautrock, right?
Yeah.
Which were these kind of jazzy, progressive bands like
boring.
Control, Guru,
boring.
Yeah. Grobschnitt. Yeah. They were pretty boring. But then I did enjoy some of those more heavier prog proto-metal bands, obviously started Lucifer's Friend, but bands like Jane, Eloy, and Epitaph, they were not bad. They were not bad bands that kind of set a little bit of that stage for what was later to come.
That's right.
You had a lot of that in England, too. I mean, you remember the old UFO, they call it more space rock before Schenker joined.
Boogie for George, yeah.
Yeah, the early UFO, and even Hawkwind. And that was kind of that real hippie-ish, spacey, progressive rock. I guess that was really huge in Germany.
But then Schenker changed it in 74.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the first German band that actually played hard rock, kind of more direct kind of style, was a band called Bastard with an album Tearing Nights. That came out in like 77, 78. That was, I think it almost feel like it influenced the very first Accept album. If you play those side by side, you hear some similarities. That kind of got the ball rolling. But yeah, the new wave of British heavy metal certainly had an impact on the German scene and gave bands like the Scorpions, Accept, a whole new stage. Trance, Bonfire, Warlock eventually came along. That was kind of the start.
There was that time, I remember Halloween broke with the Walls of Jericho. And then after that, like you said, you had all these bands. There was a band called the Breaker in Germany. There was a Steeler, I remember. There was a Cuddy Sark. There were like so many trance.
But the bands that made it bigger came earlier, and they came parallel to our magazines.
Yes,
and they were Creator.
Yep.
They were Destruction.
Sodom.
And they were Sodom.
Yeah.
And very special to me, Hellhammer, okay? And I was pen pals with all these guys and Running Wild, not to forget Running Wild.
Sure.
You know, they were...
Gravedigger.
They were very important, and we all featured them in our in the early issues. And the highlight was, in our second issue, it came out in the fall of '83. I got a demo tape from Switzerland, from Nuremsdorf, close to Zurich. It was by a guy called Tom Warrior.
Yeah.
And it was Triumph of Death, demo tape from Hellhammer. And at the time, we wanted to have the most brutal bands, you know, the fastest, most brutal, whatever bands, you know, heavier than Venom and Tank, you know, and faster than Raven, whatever, you know. So I got that tape, and I loved the artwork, you know. The production wasn't so great, you know, but it was brutal, and nobody knew it. And we were, I don't know about you guys, but in Germany, we wanted always to be the ones that have the newest bands that nobody knew.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think John was more in line with me. We were more into the more melodic, heavy. I mean, I love the thrash.
Yeah.
When it came to the real death kind of stuff, it's funny because Tom Warrior was a pen pal of mine early on, and I think I passed it.
All of us.
All of us. I mean, he was a true fan, Tom. He knew everyone.
Exactly.
My partner, Fid, who was a great writer, he was kind of my partner in Headbanger. He loved the heavier stuff. So he would write on about Exodus and Sodom and Destruction. And I passed him over, I think, to Tom. And he and Tom became really close. And Tom actually credits the Headbanger for one of the very first articles on
Apocalyptic.
Yeah.
But
I think we're all on there. We're all on there.
Yeah.
Now to end the story, you know, I got that tape. I made the story. You know, it was the very first ever story on Hellhammer worldwide that I did, and I'm very grateful because Tom remembers that in Only Death Is Real, the big book. You know,
he's a good dude.
The whole story is very accurate. Very accurate.
Yeah. I read that Ian Christie
I
book.
myself was definitely also more in the more melodic stuff, but Metal Rendezvous became known for featuring a lot of the European bands. And we did features on bands like, of course, Accept and Trance and Avenger, who later became Rage, of course.
Right.
Run Wild.
May I just finish, Fred? May I just finish that story real quick with Hellhammer? Okay. So I'm the little student, you know, sitting at my desk, and I get a call from Berlin from Noise Records, okay, who had seen my fanzine, and it was Karl Ulrich, you know, he was like the boss of Noise Records, and he said, Alex, you are that young heavy metal journalist. What are the heaviest bands that you know? And I said, well, the heaviest band is Hellhammer from Switzerland. Oh, do you have a number for me? I said, sure. So I gave him the number. He called Tom. They made the second demo, Satanic Rites, and there got the record deal for Apocalyptic Rage.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that, you know, that's how I was involved, you know. And 6 years ago, the funny thing is, even though he's from Switzerland, real close, we had never met in person, okay? And we had lost contact, you know, and then through Facebook also we got back in touch. And then he was with his new band, Triptychon, outside of Munich in a studio, and that's 6 years ago. And that's when we met for the first time, you know. That was really emotional.
I remember another demo coming out of Canada was the very first Voivod demo, which came out shortly after that. And that kind of brought in that new wave. And I remember that was similar to Hellhammer. The production was just real poor. And it sounded like it was just recorded from a ghetto blaster, but had, you know, Blower and the song Voivod and like 3 songs. And it was like, Fid just loved that. And it was kind of the start of that really new, real kind of heavy, thrashy kind of sound.
Yeah. You know, I always, I'm also a very big melodic fan, okay? I'm a huge YNT fan, you know? And I will always admit, okay, even though this is not maybe correct, whatever, you know, I love Dokken under Lock and Key, you know, I enjoy some Motley Crue. I enjoy some Red. Even the so-called poser bands, you know. Right. I'm free, you know. I'm not like a death metal fanatic or whatever, you know. Y&T is one of my all-time favorite bands.
Alex, I think that also is a characteristics of not just the three of us, but many of the people that have, you know, pushed heavy metal from a fan perspective, whether through fanzines or magazines, and we were open to the different styles. I mean, you look at Metal Rendezvous, we featured everybody, you know. We had Fiona, of all people, posing our T-shirt, right, for us. But
nobody remembers her, though.
Her and Kip Winger together.
You know, and on the other end of the spectrum, that one band that from the real heavy ones that's really dear to me, of course, is Holy Moses, who I became really good friends with of course, Sabina herself, but also with Uli Kush, who later went on to Halloween. Still good friends with them, and actually was managing them for a while here in the U.S. So, I mean, we did cover the entire spectrum, not just the real heavy bands. But
you had Gary Moore on the cover.
We did. Yeah.
Well, you know, the interesting thing is, you know, at Stred and I, you know, we doing the Bay Area Godfathers and the new Inside Metal movies. You like the way I just throw those plugs in there? But, you know, all the bands that you talk to, everyone grew up on the same music. You know, UFO, Judas Priest, you know, Zeppelin, Sabbath, Deep Purple. Whether you were a thrash band or a melodic, you know, rock band of the 80s, you know, everyone grew up on the same 70s bands, from Aerosmith to, you know, to Deep Purple. And that's how it was back then. And then it kind of got separated when the thrash became the hip thing after, you know, Motorhead. And then, of course, Venom came out. And then, you know, bands went one direction or another. But, you know, even back in LA in the clubs, you know, Slayer would play with all they call now the hair metal bands. You know, most of these bands were cover bands back then too. You know, Slayer were, Metallica essentially were. They covered new wave of British heavy metal songs, but which nobody knew, but they were essentially a cover band. And, you know, everyone kind of started from the same area. And it really was these classic 70s hard rock and metal bands that influenced everything that followed.
Exactly. And one band that we have to mention is a band that was featured and pushed by you, Bob. That's one of the greatest heavy metal bands of all time, Armored Saint.
Ah, yes. I'm glad you said that. I remember I was pushing their demo like crazy, and I remember sending it to you and to all the other fanzines. And yeah, I always thought they were one of the first bands around the same time Metallica started. And Armored Saint just had this, you know, Metallica obviously had the heavy thrash songs and all that. But when Metallica started out in LA, they were still pretty amateur. They came right out at the bat, you know, played their first show at Radio City, and the band wasn't even together. I mean, they were together less than a few months. I mean, when I first saw Armored Saint, their first show at the Woodstock, which was actually, the first time I saw them was actually before Joey Vera was in the band. And even back then, it was just this unit, seeing, you know, John Bush and Dave Pritchard and just the way the band played, their stage presence. They were like a mini Iron Maiden up on stage. It's like, holy shit. The impact they made was just amazing.
And they had these cool outfits, you know. They looked pretty professional. You had great hair, you know, great headbanging hair, not poser hair, you know. And they had these cool warrior outfits, you know. And I remember March of the Saint, Delirious Nomad when they came out, you know. And I have a letter here from John Bush, you know. He sent me back in '85 a handwritten letter saying, Alex, here's some merchandise, you know, and thank you for the interview. And we're working on a new album, Delirious Nomad, coming out pretty soon. I hope you like it, blah, blah, blah. And last year, he was at Bang Your Head Festival, which is one of the coolest heavy metal festivals in Germany. It's got like 20,000 people, so it's not as huge as Wacken, you know.
Right.
But it's in the south of Germany, not too far away from Munich, where I am, you know. So Armored Saint played there, you know. So I brought the original letter from like 35 years ago to show John Bush, you know. So the letter was written when he still had hair, you know, and and he freaked out, you know, and they put on an amazing show with all the heavy stuff, you know.
Still do.
Man.
Our Metal Rendezvous staff was a huge fan too. You know, we did a cover. We did an Armored Saint cover with Metal Rendezvous became our biggest issue at the time. We sold 50,000 copies of that magazine at that time. Metal Rendezvous, when we finished, the last issue we put out was the Megadeth cover. We sold 125,000 copies of that.
Wow.
Wow.
That's amazing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And then there was Metal Church, obviously, and Queensryche. You know, I'm a massive Queensryche fan.
Yeah.
That's also a fantastic story. I remember the day when I got the demo tape, Queen of the Reich. Okay, so that song, Queen of the Reich, I listened back to back 38 times. 38 times back to back, Queen of the Reich.
Yeah,
I was mad. And then I got the address of Kim Harris, who ran the 206 record store up in Seattle.
Yeah.
And we became pen pals, you know, and he sent me the original vinyl from 206 Records that you all also have, you know. And in 84, they came to Germany for the first time, opening up for Dio on The Last in Line. And I went there in Mannheim. I got to know where the hotel was where they stayed, and I met Kim Harris there, you know, because he and his wife, they were managing the band, and they were traveling. Out of the record store came that record. And that was amazing. And I took a picture with the guys in '84, you know, and in the following years, you know, always met them, you know, Chris DeGarmo and Joff, you know, greatest guys ever, you know. And all the albums up to Empire are amazing, incredible albums, I think.
You know, being in, I lived in Orange County, which is just south of L.A., but we would go up to, you know, the Hollywood clubs and the country club all the time, and that was the premier club. And all these bands, early on, before they got signed their big record deals, like when Queensryche had that EP out on 206 Records, they came out to the country club, and it was huge. It was a big show. It was amazing. We saw them.
Bob, you were at the source, okay? And Germany was nowhere land, you know. I mean, this was nothing, you know. And we were happy to have a Judas Priest show or to have an AC/DC show or to get a Scorpion show. But you were right where it happened.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool because we did. I mean, obviously, we saw all the great local bands at the clubs, the Hollywood clubs, the country club. They'd come down to, you know, Orange County, whether it be Armored Saint, Malice, you know, Slayer, you know, Savage Grace, all those bands. But you had, you know, Merciful Fate and Exciter came out and played the country club. Loudness came down for the first time, you know, played the country. So they came out early on, and I was, you're right. It was at the right place at the right time. We caught them early on before these bands broke. Yngwie Malmsteen with Steeler, you know, when he first came over. They did the country club in Radio City in Anaheim. And, you know, I didn't realize, you know, back then you don't realize seeing all these bands and, you know, the Motley Crues and all that. And, of course, seeing Metallica in the clubs played to just a handful of people in LA. You don't know. You know, you don't realize that you're seeing something historic in the making. You're just going because you're a metal fan and you just love the music.
Yeah. But it's great that
you know, Alex, it's the other way around too. We you know, we got all of these bands, but then when I saw what was going on in Europe at the time, I wish I would have seen Destruction in the early days or even before that, Trance. You know, when we heard Accept, they didn't come here till later on. We really wanted to see those bands.
But you know, with all due respect, you know, for especially, I mean, talking for me, okay, being German, for me, the fascination was always the British bands and the American bands. Yeah, it's always what you not have.
Exactly.
Maybe, you know, and so I mean, I respect Creator and Sodom, Running Wild, and Destruction, you know, and we featured them in the magazine. We helped them, you know. I wrote the very first ever article on Sodom. That's a fact. You know, they didn't even have a record out, okay? But the American bands, or a band like Sortilege from France, you know, and H-Bomb, you know, and Merciful Fate.
This is where we ran into a bit of technical difficulties for the next couple minutes. There was this crazy echo on the recording. So I had to cut about 2 minutes out of the conversation and then call them back, and we continue here. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
I don't know. It just went beep, beep, beep. I was gone.
Yeah, same here.
No problem.
So go ahead, and I forgot where we left off.
The conversation I had with Lars at the gas station. So that's how we became friends. And actually, when Metallica played their very first show in San Francisco, they came by Monterey to pick me up. And I went up with them. Good days.
And I think, you know, that, you know, Metallica is my number one band ever, you know. because of the history, that I got that demo tape. And I remember when I got that demo tape back, it must have been very early 83. Kill 'Em All came out in July of 83, so it was maybe January, February that I got, and we had not heard Metallica, we had not seen a picture of them, nothing, and I got that tape, and I called up my 5 headbanger friends in my hometown, okay? I said, guys, you got to stop by my place, I got to play you something. So these guys crammed up in my room, and at the time we were listening to Tank and Accept and Motorhead, and Saxon, like we all do, Maiden. And I put in the tape, and Hit the Lights came on, and we were like thrashing, and the term thrashing wasn't even out. And we were headbanging to the songs, and it was 5 tracks, in Metal Militia, Fan Lord, whatever, and at the end of the tape, we were all like totally gobsmacked, like, wow, what is this, And I said, guys, this band is so heavy and so fast, I'm sure they will never get a record deal.
Yeah.
Good, I'm not an A&R guy, right?
Well, I think a lot of, most of those bands started independently because no major records would sign, especially the thrash
at the
metal
time,
bands.
Yeah.
Thank God for labels like Shrapnel Records and Megaforce and Metal Blade, and of course the German labels Noise and Neat Records out of England. Otherwise, if labels like Neat weren't around, you wouldn't really have a new wave of British heavy metal, or Heavy Metal Records or Ebony. None of the major labels were signing. Of course, EMI signed Iron Maiden and stuff early on, but it was very limited on the bands that they would sign. So most of it was done independently.
Right. So I think that we can be so glad that we have been there when heavy metal really got going, and we were even a part of it.
We were, absolutely. And it's right place at the right time. Even though we were all from different corners of the world, we were still at the right place at the right time.
Absolutely. And it's so uniting, we were all into the same stuff, being in different corners of the world, we had the same thing, in our DNA. And today, like a couple of years ago, after I got finished with Bravo, just for fun, I revived my Shock Power, and as you do these days, I did a Facebook page, and I called it Shock Power Rising. So all the listeners, that are maybe interested, they could check out Shock Power Rising on Facebook, and you see all the old metal photos, the old records, and from the magazine, all the old covers and stuff, And I got people from all over the world. I have about 1,800, I think, 1,800 followers, And they are from Greece, they are from Bulgaria, they are from America, they are from South America, obviously, where they are total crazy metalheads,
Sure.
Chile, Brazil, Mexico, And so it's great, to have that community back.
Absolutely.
Now you fired me, Alex. Now I should do the same thing with the Metal Rendezvous page.
Yeah.
You should.
I mean, Bob, do you know my page, Shock Power Rising, on Facebook?
I think I'm following you.
Yeah. I don't know.
I am.
Not my private page, but Shock Power Rising.
Yeah, I've got that.
And you can do that with the Headbanger, show all the old stories, I mean, I'm showing I wrote the first Slayer story. I got that letter from Stephen Craig. What's
Craig.
his name?
Stephen Craig.
Right. He sent platinum management, whatever.
Yeah.
Out of Cudahy, California. And he sent me a photo, and we put in the first ever Slayer story. It's incredible, I'm so happy that I was there at the time when it happened, And today, with no disrespect, but bands like Sabaton, and all these Power Wolf, and all the new breed of heavy metal. Of course, there are good ones like Night Demon, Jarvis, he's a cool guy,
Great
very,
guy,
he's like us, just
totally.
a little younger, but Jarvis is just like us,
Absolutely.
But all these new big bands, they do nothing for me, I must admit.
A lot of it to me has to do with the production, too. There was something about that raw analog production of those early metal albums from the 80s, whether it be the new wave of British heavy metal or the German bands or whatever. Yeah. It just had this warm feel. Now everything, it's just like, all the limits are pushed to the T, and it's just this bombardment of this very digital sound.
That's why I like some of those bands that do kind of play a little more of that retro stuff. I mean, one of my favorite bands right now is Lucifer, right? I mean, their look, their feel, their sound.
Yeah.
Any band with a female singer is going to get John Strednansky's vote.
No, not quite, because there's some other.
I know. I love teasing you about that, John. You know that.
If I should be brutally honest, I would say the heavy metal years, and even to make it a wider spectrum. Okay, for me, the heavy metal years were 1978, Judas Priest, Stained Glass, to 1988. Justice for All, and Queensryche, Operation Mindcrime. Those 10 years, and to make it smaller, the range, it would be 79 to 85 or 86.
That was the prime.
Those were 1980, 81, 82. Unbeatable.
Yeah.
Unbeatable.
Well, after 86, 87, especially here in LA, because, even the old LA bands, whether you like them or not, the Motley Crue's, Rats, that was before the trend started of the glam thing. And, those bands started heavier. Rat was kind of more of a Judas Priest meets Aerosmith kind of sounding band and the early stuff. And then it kind of evolved into the MTV thing. And after 86, when it came to 87, 88, that's when you got all the copycat bands and all the bands sounded the same and looked alike and were doing the power ballads. And that's really when I think it got lost, was after 86.
It got watered down.
It got
watered down.
We all remember the formula, right? You put out the heavy song, then you put to attract the guys, then you put out the ballads to attract the girls, and then you put out the live performance video, right? I mean, every band did that in the late 80s. In that
the charming thing is always, whether you make a magazine or you have a band and make a demo tape, the charming thing is always when you are a pioneer. You don't know how it's done, yet you still do it. I didn't know how to put together a magazine. We did it. A band cuts a demo tape, as did you, We're all in the same boat. A band doesn't know how to make a demo, but they do it, So, and they have nothing to look up to, because in the early bands from the 70s, you had like Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, but they were all kind of washed out back in the late 70s, Led Zeppelin were over, Deep Purple were over, Black Sabbath, Ozzy left, So they were all over, and then that was the hour of Iron Maiden and all these bands, and that's when we came in, and we didn't, and we were there. I mean, in school, I was an outcast because I was into heavy metal.
Yeah,
all the chicks, the chicks, they were into the Police, and into Blondie and Supertramp, and all these bands, Alan Parsons Project, whatever, and Duran Duran and what have you. As a heavy metal fan, coming with an Iron Maiden or a Kiss T-shirt, you were an outcast.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It was something very special, very elitist, a very small group of heavy metal, but they were super committed to it, and that's what made it so special, And later on, and talking about the bands later, they could look up to Metallica, they could look up to all the bands that made it big. Okay, that's how you do it.
Alex, it's funny you say that, because I had a similar experience. I went to high school in the late 70s, which was even worse. That's when back on that, among the teenagers, it was the disco era and the punk era. So I was the outcast there. That's why I think Bill Hale and I formed such a tight bond, because we were the very few people that were into the same thing. And, he's still one of my best friends, and ended up taking all the photographs from Metal Rendezvous. So we need to get him into our family reunion as well when we do this.
Absolutely. We'll get him on. I got to get Bill on a future podcast as well, so we'll work on that. But you're so right about the fanzines, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I wasn't a writer. I wasn't a journalist. I had no idea. And I read back at some of those old Headbanger fanzines, and it's fucking embarrassing, some of the stuff. But we didn't know better.
In the grammatical errors back then,
I think you guys were better than me. But again, I took a lot of my cue from Ron Quintana's magazine, and the fact that he could just paste stuff in there, and it didn't have to be perfect. He could throw in little handwritten stuff, and it's like, this is cool. This is kind of cool. It's like, I could do this. This is, nothing was professionally typeset. Like, I think Slagle's magazine, New Heavy Metal Review, that was real pro. It was all really typeset and nice.
Well, not in the beginning. The very first issue was written with the hand.
Yeah.
I still don't have that first issue. I remember buying number 3 when it came out.
Yeah.
Riot on
He had typing and stuff,
Right.
Hey, we all evolved. One of our early issues, we were pretty fortunate because Bill Hale's mom, this is kind of a weird secret about Metal Rendezvous. Bill Hale's mom worked as a cleaning lady in a lawyer's office. So we snuck in there with a bunch of 6-packs of beer late at night and used their copy machine.
Wow.
to run all the early issues of Metal Rendezvous.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I always wondered how I was losing money, because I would print up the magazine, I would sell it for $1, and then I would mail it to Germany, which cost me $1.20 back then. And it's like, why am I losing money? I didn't have an accountant back then. I couldn't figure it out.
But, I made a little money with the taping, the tape trading,
Right.
Because I did not only trade, we all had these heavy metal lists, and you would add with the typewriter, Angel Witch 1981 Blackpool Live, and all the demo tapes and stuff. And then I got orders, from other fans, I want this, I want that. And then I had a double-deck tape machine, and I recorded the demo tapes and sent them out, and that's how I made a little money on the side, that's what we invested into Shock Power.
I remember that was like the greatest invention ever, the dual tape deck, where you could just dub and you could do a double speed. Remember that?
Yes.
You remember what they put on some of those professional cassette tapes, right? Tape copying kills the music industry. Remember how they used to put that on?
I remember that.
Yeah. But I remember I had a very cheap record player, okay? And I had a friend who invested like $2,000 into a nice system,
That's a lot of money back then.
He had 3 records. He had Black Sabbath, Mob Rules, Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast, and Screaming for Vengeance from Judas Priest, which are fantastic all-time classics.
Oh, yeah.
But those were the 3 poor records that were standing in his room. And I had this very cheap record player, but I had 200 records. So I invested the money, not in the sound, but into the music.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a lot of money. I don't know about you, but I'm coming from a normal family, so I had my pocket money, which was... So every record that I bought, and you couldn't listen to it beforehand. You didn't know was it good or not, So you really thought about, what am I going to buy? And at the time, I remember, with my friend, okay, you're going to buy Screaming for Vengeance, and I'm going to buy Number of the Beast. And then we swap it, and we tape it.
That's exactly what we did, especially when the imports came out, because imports were so expensive, and we wanted all the new wave of British heavy metal and all the new bands that were coming out of Europe and Holland.
Yes.
So for us to spend, $10, $11 on a record, that was a lot. So we would do the same. We would buy certain records. I would buy like the Angel Witch, Tigers of Pantang. He would buy, other records. And we would go home and tape them off each other. And eventually we ended up wanting to buy the records once we had money, because back then it was the ownership. To own the album, was something, cool. So we would end up buying it back on vinyl and then buying it on CD when it came out. So
and now you have to buy the remastered reissue with 27 bonus tracks.
Exactly. The box set, and spent $150.
I remember, and I still remember the date even, okay? It was December 3rd, 1981. And in Ludwigshafen, there was a festival called the Heavy Metal Charger. It was opening Def Leppard, Accept, and Judas Priest.
Oh, wow.
So it was High and Dry, it was it was Breaker, and Point of Entry. And I love Point of Entry. A lot of people don't like Point of Entry. I love Point of Entry, too, big Priest fan. So that concert, okay, so we saved up the money for the ticket, I bought the ticket like 6-7 weeks prior to the show and put it on my pin wall, and waited every day for the show to happen. But once at the show, I remember being in the front of the stage, in the center of stage, from the first act, Accept, to Def Leppard, to Judas Priest, and did not leave the spot. But I had no money to buy the T-shirt, and that was heartbreaking. That was heartbreaking, not to buy the tour shirt.
That was the thing is, you had to have the shirt. I mean, that was, you had to show off the next day at school. I was there. I was at the UFO show. I was, yeah. But back then it was great. I mean, I remember back when it started, tour shirts were like $6, $7, which...
Oh, no, not in Germany.
No?
They cost more than a record. They were like 20, 25 Deutschmarks.
Wow.
Which is like 20, 25 bucks, and so that was a lot of money. And you would think, okay, am I going to buy the new Black Sabbath or am I going to buy the T-shirt, You really had to make a decision. Yeah. But hey, it's great. I'm so happy. I can't stress how happy I am. I'm now 54 years of age, and nobody wants to get old, blah, 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 But to look back and say, hey, I was young when all these bands happened, and I was involved and I was there and I met them and I met all of them, makes me so happy, that I'm very glad, and sometimes I look at today's 15-year-olds and I hope they're having fun, and they're having a good time, which they're obviously entitled to, but I would not trade at all.
Absolutely. And you know what I love about you, Alex, is it shows that you have this passion for metal music. And you're someone that has become a celebrity in your own right. You hang out with the biggest celebrities, whether it be the pop stars and movie stars. I see your pictures, with you and Michael Jackson, all these people together. But still, your heart, even though you've met some of the biggest pop stars, your heart is still in heavy metal. You still have that same passion as you did 30 years ago. And that's the cool thing about metal fans. I mean, you could be, a multi-millionaire lawyer or whatever, but, you start talking to these guys about metal, it's still that same passion as it was. And I don't think any other music form really has that.
To me, it's a brotherhood, It's a brotherhood, and it's so funny sometimes, I meet some people, and somebody, and the guy says, I used to like heavy metal, I used to have all the Iron Maiden records. I said, what? You used to have? Where are they now? Well, that's a long time ago.
I grew up now. I got a family with kids. I can't be listening to that.
Yeah. No. As Joe Perry once said it, once a rocker, always a rocker.
Very true.
And if it's too loud, you're too old.
Yeah. Or as Lemmy said, if you think you're old to rock and roll, then you probably are.
So you're still going to a lot of concerts out in Germany, huh, Alex? A lot of festivals?
I don't go to that many. I have every year I go to Bang Your Head because of Corona. Obviously, worldwide, this year's festivals get canceled. The Rock Hard Festival, Wacken, and Bang Your Head, and Keep It True, Those are the four most important heavy metal festivals over in Germany. And I never been to Wacken. It's too huge. I don't like too many bands, But I always go to Bang Your Head. I've been to Keep It True, but at Bang Your Head, it's in a rural area, like an hour south of Stuttgart, and you have about 15 to 20,000 fans, and you hang out in the backstage area, and you have Loudness playing, you have Death Angel playing, you have Metal Church, Michael Schenker, Twisted Sister, they all come there, you meet all these guys, and Armored Saint and Vicious Rumors, so all these bands are coming there, it's like a huge family festival. But other than that, if Ozzy Osbourne and Judas Priest would come as was planned, I'd go, and I'd see Whitesnake and Metallica, but and Rose Tattoo, which is a favorite of mine, But I don't go to every show. I have over 1,000 shows, over 1,000 shows because of my job, So I've seen them all, But a fantastic show was last June, the reunion of Rainbow, with Ronnie Romero singing. That's when I met Richie Blackmore, and I was in the photo pit. I had a special pass, access all areas. So the whole show, I stood at Olympiahalle. I stood the whole show in the photo pit, right in front of Blackmore,
Wow.
And he was in such a fantastic mood. He was even smiling on stage. The fans came out. They had all their rainbow shirts on, a very devoted crowd, and he played all the classics, and he had all the huge album covers, Long Live Rock and Roll Rising, Down to Earth. He had all in the big backdrop, to every song that he played, he had the huge covers in the back. And John Lord, when he did like Perfect Strangers from Deep Purple and Child in Time, there was a huge picture of John Lord in the back, That was a show to remember.
Wow, that's awesome.
He hasn't played in America with that lineup.
No, he hasn't.
Has not.
That was really good. I was totally amazed.
Wow. Okay.
And the funny thing was, I had done 2 interviews, like 3 years ago and 1.5 years ago, but they were on the telephone.
With Richie.
I spoke with him on the telephone, and he was fantastic. He was very good. And I live in Munich, not too far away from Musicland Studios, where Deep Purple recorded Stormbringer,
sure.
and Rainbow recorded Rising. It's just around my corner, And I talked to him about that, and he said to me, Alex, you know a lot. So that was like being knighted, from Richie Blackmore, And then the show came up, and I said, I gotta have a picture with Richie Blackmore, He's missing in my collection,
Right.
I need to meet him. I got Eddie Van Halen, I got Jimmy Page, I got Angus Young, Schenker and Gary Moore, but I got no Richie Blackmore. And I talked to him on the phone, and he was great. And when I got backstage, the organizer said, Alex, nobody dares to ask Richie if he wants to take a picture. Nobody, because he's so moody,
Right.
and nobody wants to get near him. They're all afraid. So I waited for after the show. I saw him go on stage, and he had a very grim look on his face. He came with a bodyguard, walked on stage, passed me, and of course I didn't hit him up, He wants to go on stage and play a concert. That'd be a bad idea, And after the show, I waited for 2 hours, and then he came out with Candace. They pulled the car, a Range Rover, right to the door where he came out. And it was inside the arena, in a huge garage type of thing, and I was there, So when he walked out, I hit him up. I said, hey, Richie, excuse me, my name is Alex, and we did a telephone interview. And he shook my hand, but he kept walking towards the car, He didn't stop. He was polite, but he kept on walking. So I walked with him, I said, Richie, would you please mind having a picture taken? He said, no problem, And then we took a picture.
Oh,
I waited 2 hours.
Well, that was worth the wait.
And listen. Before, I was really afraid. You know why? Because I imagine, I'm a huge fan of all things Blackmore, Rainbow, Deep Purple, the whole 9 yards, okay? I'm a huge admirer. On the phone, he was fantastic. Now, I meet him in person. And now imagine he'd be the total a-hole, okay? If he'd be like, leave me alone, I'm not interested, get off, get away, fuck off, whatever, And then my dreams would have been destroyed in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I don't think I could listen to the music anymore, So that was a very dangerous thing to do, if you get me,
No, I know. But when you meet your heroes and they're assholes, it's a huge disappointment. Yeah.
I have only good experiences, thank God. Gene Simmons was cool, All these guys that are a little bit, Ronnie James Dio is a sweetheart. Absolutely. We all know that, and he was always cool. He was maybe the coolest of all, and Angus Young, But Gene Simmons, he was cool, Blackmore was cool, So it's very, very important that the guys that you admire don't behave bad.
Well, that was going to lead me to the next question. I was going to ask if you ran into who was the biggest asshole you met and interviewed, if you want to get into that.
Imagine, the biggest letdown I had was back in '85. I bought the Rising Force record. And
why does that not surprise me?
And at first, I was a bit disappointed because it had only 2 tracks with vocals.
Right.
It was all instrumental. I mean, they were great. Icarus Dream Suite, Opus 4, and all that stuff. But then the show came. He came to Germany. Ingrid played in Frankfurt in a small club. And after the club, my friends, we drove back we found out what hotel he stayed in, So we met him in a hotel, and I told him that I was a huge fan, I had the Alcatraz No Parole record. I had the Steeler Cold Day in Hell,
Right.
And the demo tapes from Rising Force from Sweden, And then we took a picture, and Jens Johansson and Anders Johansson were there too. They were in the band, obviously. And we took that picture, and you can see it on my Facebook page. And he's looking in the air, very arrogant. You take one picture, you look in the camera, but Yngwie looking up in the air like he doesn't care, And that was a big letdown. And in 2008, many years later, I met him again at Balingen, Bang Your Head Festival, and he was cool. Then he was cool, so, yeah. But
Cool.
Everybody's got the Yngwie Malmsteen, I'm gonna unleash the beast story, right? Unleash the fury.
Unleash the fury.
Hey guys, unfortunately I gotta go. I got a 12:30 meeting I have to go to, so.
Okay.
That was fun. I mean, Stred and I, we always meet for a beer in Munich, but hopefully one day we can get together, this would be fantastic.
All three of us, sure.
Yeah, hey,
we'll do it. We'll do it.
I still have my flight on the books to come to Munich in August.
But now there are talks they're going to cancel the Oktoberfest because of the Corona stuff.
So I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'll reschedule it as soon as I possibly can. So.
Well, it was a pleasure, gentlemen. We will definitely be continued.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Alex. All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast. Subscribe and listen to all episodes by going to our pages on iTunes, Spreaker, YouTube, Spotify, and more. You can listen to all other episodes and access up-to-date information and news on the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast by going to our website at www.shockwaveskullsessions.com. Email all comments, questions, and suggestions to shockwaveskullsessions@gmail.com.